Happy Monday, everybody. Football season is officially over after one of the worst Super Bowls I've ever seen. Congratulations to the Eagles. Matt Norlander from CBS Sports and the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Joining us on a Monday, Evan Miyakawa is going to hop in about 30 minutes. We're going to talk data. We're going to talk stats. We're going to talk analysis. Evan's one of the best in the game, and for whatever reason, he actually listens to our show. So he's got some takes on our program that we do here. Norlander, how was the weekend? I know you were in studio all day Saturday. You got to see an absolute banger in stores on Friday night. UConn St. John's was for my money the best game of the weekend, even though the number 1 and number 2 teams both went down. How are we living? How are we feeling the day after the Super Bowl?
We're good. We don't have much this Monday show in years past. We've had maybe 5-6 minutes to dedicate to Super Bowl chat because it's so in the immediate throes of the game ending. That doesn't need to happen. The Eagles absolutely destroyed the Chiefs. The Jordan Mahomes comparisons can go in the garbage bin forever. And congrats to the city of Philadelphia for getting a big time Super Bowl win and bringing us back to the days of old, because we had gotten Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl was a rout. The Bucks Chiefs one was also not that close, but it had been a minute since we'd had an 80s 90s style true just evisceration. So I was feeling nostalgic for my younger years. We'll save the Kendrick stuff for now, spinning at the end.
Kendrick's got white people upset, confused.
We'll save that for the end. So the Super Bowl was a big old dud, which is fine. I actually felt like I was talking with a few buddies. I felt like the Super Bowl is always a massive deal. I'm not saying it's not, but it did feel like this year. But I asked him, I was like, hey, is it me? Because I've been, so wrapped up in college basketball stuff and doing all this, but it feels like the hype for this one is dialed down a couple notches from what we've had, what's been custom for 20 years or so. And all my friends agreed. It wasn't that there wasn't hype or buildup. It's just that it was not nearly at the level that we've had, which was especially interesting because it was a team going for a three-peat. Maybe it was because Chiefs haven't been absolutely dazzling. There's Chiefs fatigue. We got this matchup 2 years ago. Whatever. That's in our rear view. Let's get to college hoops. Where do you want to start? I mean, we can start in stores on Friday if you want. More than happy to go there. We can start with some of the biggest stuff from Saturday. It's all up to you, bud. There's a few things that we didn't get to on the Sunday show of Eye on College Basketball that I definitely want to hit on as well. But guide the ship. Where do you want to take off?
You know where I want to start. Where it just means more. Okay. Auburn going down to Florida was a game that happened, but at no point was it a game. Like, the Gators absolutely smoked those guys in the jungle, and it was one of those performances where, like, I'm sure a lot of people tuned in, like, maybe, like, start of the second half. Like, they see the score on the bottom line, and they're like, oh, I need to get over to ESPN and check that out. Dude, Florida whooped those dudes. Now, I know about the Bruce Pearl, Todd Golden dynamic, but maybe a lot of other people don't, okay? Kind of like a mentor-mentee. They're both Jewish, which is rare in the college basketball community, especially in the Southeastern Conference. But, there is a mutual respect. Those two teams, those two programs met for the SEC championship game in Nashville last year, and I had a chance to talk to both of them about it, and they were like, yeah, every other day of the year, that's great, but I'm here to win a title. And that game wasn't very competitive. Auburn went out and whooped Florida and won the SEC championship. But that game, there was some juice, and it was just one of those things where, like, Florida couldn't miss, man. Like, they got contributions from everybody. You had Hawk coming off the bench, dropping double digits. It was just, I don't know what you took away from that game. Obviously, Auburn is the metrics darling, and we'll talk to Evan Miyakawa about that because he's got Auburn at the top of his rankings as well. But still, man, like, you've got to give Florida their flowers, man. That game was all about what the Gators did offensively, defensively, frustrating Janai Broome. That was very impressive stuff from a Florida team that I feel like we need to start looking at a little bit differently as we head into the home stretch of February. What say you, Norlander?
Yeah, I agree on Florida's end. I've had them in the national title contender tier for a bit here, but a win like this really elevates it. They did not have Elijah Martin available. Elijah Martin is probably the team's second best player, but he wasn't a go for this one due to injury. And so Walter Clayton Jr. did return. I think he's got a hip issue. So to be determined on how long he'll be out. But it's not
elite hype man on the bench. I mean, the energy was
A+
from him.
He was. Clayton was tremendous in returning, 19 points, 9 dimes, 6 assists, a block and a steal. He played the entire game. He played all 40 minutes and was impressive in doing so. To me, Florida's good enough to win a national championship because of its guards and because it's, for the most part, it's a fairly reliable team on both ends of the floor. Now, what's interesting is that Florida a week before this only managed 44 points against Tennessee and had its worst offensive outing shooting-wise in program recorded history. And then it comes back and does this. So, listen, Auburn, Johni Broome did not have a good game. He kind of did some stat padding near the end. And interestingly enough, him and Flagg both had just okay days on days where both their teams lost. Personally, I'm not that interested in who should be number one because it doesn't much matter. Frankly, it's an empty calorie discussion because the resume and what they do, what these teams have built up, that's what matters. Building out seeding. Auburn's been the number one team. Duke's no stranger to being number one. Alabama's been number one. I understand like the Super Bowl's over and that's going to be a talking point. It just doesn't gain much traction with me. So as we record this, we are 3 hours away from the AP Top 25 refreshing. If you're an Auburn fan and want to get up in your feels over whether your team remains number one or not, I'm not going to stop you. I get it, but I'm telling you, it doesn't mean anything. It just does not mean anything whatsoever if your team remains number one or not. To me, this is more about Florida getting a win that was the tangible piece of evidence required to show that this team is a national title contender. I wouldn't put them first, second, third, or fourth most likely to cut down the nets in San Antonio, but now that team deserves to be in that group.
Okay, very good. It also keeps Florida alive for, at least in the mix, for a regular season SEC championship. We have Auburn, Alabama, Part 1 coming up this weekend. Those two teams are both tied atop the Southeastern Conference, but Florida and Texas A&M are both 2 games back. So I thought that was fantastic. You mentioned Walter Clayton. He was great. Alex Condon was really good. The Florida big man, he had 17 and 10. Hawk came off the bench for 16. Like, on aggregate, and like, look, I mean, we'll talk to Evan Miyakawa. He's the numbers guy. He's the guru. I'm not trying to go, like, next level with the college basketball analysis. Florida made a lot of shots, okay? They hit 13 threes. But on aggregate, Florida's bigs were able to hang with and exceed Johni Broome's output. He did have an off game. He was missing layups, and then Florida would come down the floor and just bang, 3. And, I mean, they led by 21 points at one point in the second half. So, yeah, Florida's a problem. Let's see where they go from here because it's still the SEC. You still got a murderous 6-7 games left in the regular season before we get to Nashville, which is also going to be just an absolute meat grinder, and I'm absolutely here for it. So, shout out to Florida. We'll see what happens with Auburn when the poll comes out. You said 1 o'clock Eastern time, Norlander? What's the AP doing, man? They're hanging on to relevancy. You'd think that they could at least roll out of bed on a Monday morning and put out a poll.
Don't ask me. I don't vote in it. All I know is it comes out 1 Eastern every Monday. It used to be noon, but that got bumped back an hour for reasons I don't even understand.
Unbelievable. All right, let's go to the ACC. Duke, Clemson. Now, I will give you credit. Clemson got the win 77-71. On Thursday's show, you said, and I'm paraphrasing here, Duke needs to be careful. They need to watch out. You're going into Little John and playing a Clemson team. You didn't put them on up. You put them on upset alert. I don't know if you called for Clemson to win. You do so many podcasts. Maybe you hedged your bets on other places.
You know how it's done.
Yes, that is how it's done. But Clemson gets the win, first ACC loss of the season, and I mean, this is the same Clemson team that lost to Georgia Tech in the midweek in triple overtime. So, go figure. But Duke is unblemished no more in the ACC. Nice win for Clemson, and I've had some folks in my mentions on Twitter, and God bless you, but, they're like, give Clemson their flowers. Tigers outcoached Duke. They outplayed Duke. And yes, for 40 minutes, you could say that. Like, Clemson shot, 60% nearly for the game? Like, Duke struggled to put the ball in the basket. They did take a lead late. Cooper Flagg hit a big 3, put them up 1 in the final minute. But Clemson gutted this thing out. So, yeah, hat tip to the Tigers. It doesn't now, in the larger perspective, like you're talking about Auburn, Duke, who's number one, who cares? Duke had a chance to run through the ACC regular season unbeaten. That's obviously not going to happen.
I told you.
anymore.
You said it was going to happen. I kept telling you they were going to take a loss.
Yeah, I did. They don't call me the KOD around here for nothing. So I thought it was going to be at the Joel. I mean, I think that's a tough place to walk into. But shout out to Clemson. They got it done. What did you make from the loss for Duke, and what did you make of Clemson's performance?
Big problems in Little John. That's what I know.
Very good. Very good.
I think we're one more. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying that I will stoke the flames on it. I'm just telling you it will be a thing if we get one more. We are one more sequence away of Duke losing a game in the final seconds and Cooper Flagg making a mistake from that being a thing. He's been awesome.
Like he's not a clutch player, that he's
no,
not a BT-peer?
that
he's
would
not
be
a BT-peer, baby.
Would be insane if it gets to that point, but frankly, with internet discourse and some mainstream media, I guess I wouldn't be shocked if it goes that way. I'm just telling you, and then we're going to get to Clemson because I want to give a little Clemson love here. Duke lost to Kentucky and to Kansas in November on neutral floors, and in both of those games, Cooper Flagg had turnovers when, if he had not turned the ball over, Duke would have had a shot to win the game, and those were in the closing seconds.
Okay.
Against Clemson on Saturday, through no fault of his own, he slips on the floor. It's obviously a travel. The ball's turned over. Duke loses his chance to win at Clemson. I'm just saying, if we get one more of these, whenever it happens, next week or in the Elite Eight, that will be a thing that winds up getting attached to Cooper Flagg's fairly tremendous freshman season. I'm not saying it should be the defining thing. I don't even know if it will be the defining thing. I'm just telling you, Duke only has 3 losses, and they've all been competitive losses. Duke has been a top 3 team in the country, but in every loss, John Shire has entrusted end-of-game scenarios to his freshmen, and for varying reasons, there have been turnovers in every single scenario. So if that happens one more time, people are it's going to be hey, why does this keep happening? Should Shire not be giving the ball to Flagg? I'm not saying we're there. I'm saying if it happens a 4th time, it will be a thing. Just pointing it out. Flagg was a non-factor through the first 80% of that game.
Yes.
And then he turned it on. They were only in the game at the end because of Cooper Flagg. Although Tyrese Proctor had a game-high 23 points, including what I thought was a humongous 3 in the midst of Duke's push on the back end of the second half. Flagg really was ready to take that team on his back and get it done. Clemson, though, gets the win that it needed to ensure that it's going to make the NCAA tournament. It's now 19-5. It's well on its way. But you get this win at home. It cancels out the triple OT home loss to the Bees with Jimmy Boeheim sideline for that one earlier in the week. All around was tremendous. Victor Locken, I said this on HQ on Saturday night, Victor Locken was the most impressive and important player over the course of 40 minutes for the Tigers. I thought he did a great job and completely neutralized Kaman Malawach, who fouled out. But even like Jaden Zachary hit a big 3 late. Ian Shefflin is just a jack of all trades, tweener big that there aren't a lot of guys at the high major level like him. And when it comes to a scouting report and how you prep for him, he's just got little wrinkles to his game that give Clemson a chance against almost any kind of team, because he's not a major mismatch guy, but if you don't have the right scheme for him and the right guy on him, like, he's going to exploit you at some point eventually. Chase Hunter's the best player on the team. He had a key block on Proctor with about 10 seconds to go that ended Duke's hopes. That block was sick and really, really well done there. So, yeah, good job on Clemson. Now comfortably it was in the tournament field to begin with, but now it's at a point where, okay, you get that win, you're probably like a 7 seed right now, and barring complete and utter collapse, you're going to be in the dance and the second best team in the ACC.
So Victor Locken outplayed Cooper Flagg. That's what you're saying. I mean, that's what
start
happened.
to finish. That is true.
Yeah. Like I watched.
Flagg was great down the stretch, Hartzell, but just over the course of 40 minutes, Victor Locken had a better game than Cooper Flagg. That is true. Yes.
Okay, so we're coming off of a year. Like I used to joke about Brad Brownell, who, by the way, is 6 weeks away from being the dean of coaching in the ACC, with Leonard Hamilton exiting. But this is a Clemson program that's coming off of an Elite Eight run last year. Like, do we feel differently about Clemson basketball? Like you're a national college basketball writer. You're based in the Northeast. Do you feel differently about Clemson basketball in light of what you had last year in the tournament and in light of results like we had Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, I'm bringing up the look under Brownell. So they're going to make a second straight tournament for the first time ever under Brownell. This will be the third in the past 5 seasons. And the last time that happened, where Clemson basketball made at least 3 tournaments in a 5-year stretch, was the glory years. 08 to 2011, Oliver Purnell, 5 seed, 7 seed, 7 seed. Then he leaves. Brownell, 12 seed in year 1. Clemson never won a tournament game in that stretch, by the way.
Well, Clemson used to be the team that would like run through the non-conference. They'd be like 15-1, and then ACC play would start, and they'd go like 7-10 or 7-12, or you know what I'm saying? Like they would just be sub 500 in the ACC, and you'd be like same old Clemson. But again, like that was an impressive performance in a game that a lot of people were like, watch out, Duke's going down to Clemson. That's going to be a tough game. They almost beat them last year, and they did get it done on Saturday. Rush the court, the whole shebang. So, and by the way, I thought the Dick Vitale thing was cool. We touched on it last week. He was back behind the mic for the first time in years. Of course, it was a Duke game. Insert joke here. But he got to see Cooper Flagg courtside. He still got it, man. Dick Vitale's 85 years old.
I know.
Put some respect on that man's name.
It was cool. Yeah. Now, you didn't get, unless you were dialed in all the way and looking for it on ESPN streaming, or they shot it over to ESPN News because a Luka-less, LeBron-less Lakers-Pacers game went about 24 minutes long. You missed the entire introduction of Vitale, but fortunately a lot of that stuff was shared on social media. He's bawling his eyes out as they're bringing him back. Dave O'Brien on the call, Corey Alexander as well. The fact that he got that good of a game, he got a court storm. You got an, are you serious? Just so wonderful. And the highlight of the weekend for me was for Vitale to get to see and experience that. I don't know what his, and why would I, but I don't know what his broadcast schedule is like. Like, was this a one game we'll see in 2 weeks? Is he going to get one game a week? I don't know, but I'll take as much Sticky V as I can possibly get. And I came on a weekend where Hubie Brown had quite the classy and emotional send-off on Sunday shortly before the Super Bowl. I get it why they did it in Milwaukee, given his start there. But kind of a bummer that got, a bit snowed over by the Super Bowl. Hubie Brown, has there ever been a better combination of coach and broadcaster in basketball history for a career? I don't think so. So anyway, good stuff on in the broadcasting booth for 2 bona fide Hall of Famers and legends there. Okay, let's go to Friday night into stores.
Speaking of broadcasters,
oh boy,
Norlander, there's a new sheriff in the Big Ten. Ha ha! The Big East, and his name is Rick Pitino.
So
that was me doing my Gus Johnson impression.
So this became a thing. So you texted me, and then I had someone else text because I'm at the game and I didn't. So what?
By the way, how's the wireless at Gamble? I've heard stories.
It was spotty.
Yes.
Spottier than it needed to be, and now this isn't a complaint. It's just a state.
I'll make a call.
It's a state of the affairs.
Yes, I understand.
Used to be that media actually had pretty good seating at Gamble, and now we're
go off, King.
We're off. No, it's whatever, but we're higher up because they're going to make literally millions of more dollars by having that seating available for
Drip Field where you sitting. Okay, I mean we can't have Norlander in the nosebleeds.
That affects the wireless situation as well. Like I literally at halftime went down to I went to the lower level, and there was a table where security was at the start of the game for people to get checked in, but that wasn't needed anymore by halftime. The signal was better there, and I was just checking a few things. And a couple of people are like, "Hey, Norlander, what's going on?" I'm like, just doing some work here because I can't do it on Media Row because the wireless isn't good. Anyway, the point is this. I had a couple people tell me about the Gus Johnson thing. And then one person at CBS Sports HQ, who I will not name because I guess there's no reason to, but I was in studio all day Saturday, and the Gus Johnson impression got progressively more caricaturish, where it became, and there's a new sheriff in the Big Ten. That's not how he sounded, but it became a thing. And I was busy covering the game, writing on the game. So I don't know if this was a thing on social media or not, but you did text me, and some others did as well, that said Gus Johnson just sent Rick Pitino to the Big Ten. So
Look, I work on Saturdays during college football season when
man.
Gus Johnson's doing the big noon kickoff on Fox. So I don't get to hear Gus Johnson during football season. But I have heard Gus Johnson because I'm 41 years old, and this guy used to be the voice of the sport. I mean, he was one of the best college basketball announcers in the game. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and look up the Isaiah Johnson of Washington fame. Washington Huskies.
Isaiah Thomas, by the way, Mr.
Isaiah Thomas, I apologize. Over, was that Arizona? Like, this dude has had absolute stones. Like, he had the pipes. He was
Xavier, Ohio State, 2007. Bring me back. I know.
There are many CBS examples now. He's obviously, I mean, like, this guy has gone on an absolute odyssey. He used to call Champions League games for Fox. Soccer, that is. Football. Like, this dude has gone on a trip.
There's a new sheriff in the Champions League.
But listen, man, it's Big East basketball. He kept calling solo ball shallow ball.
No.
Yes, dude. His name is Solo. It's 4 letters. 2 of them are vowels. You can't screw this up, man. Like, I'm not going to say that Gus Johnson is washed, but he might be showing signs of washed. Anyway, the game itself.
Yes, the game itself.
UConn came out of the gates, man, and I'm like,
Dude.
okay, we're done here. Like, UConn is ready. They are ready to. They have answered the bell. They are getting ready to take all that stuff, shove it aside, and go for a three-peat. Okay. And then something happened at the under-12 media timeout, and Rick Pitino was like, okay, like, we're good. Let's settle down. Let's play the most ferocious 28 minutes of defense that these guys have ever seen, because that's what St. John's does, man. These guys are just Rottweilers, dude. Like, their defensive intensity, like, again, you don't have to be a college basketball junkie to just see it. Like, nobody's open. Nobody's getting open looks. Offensively, they are challenged, okay? They struggle offensively. But St. John's won that game just on grit and determination and, like, obviously elite coaching, because that's what Pitino is. But, Norlander, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of St. John's coming from behind and beating a UConn team that looked like it had its absolute A game in the first 8 minutes of that contest Friday night?
It's one of the more impressive script flips that I've seen all season. St. John's ranks 346 out of 364 teams nationally in three-point accuracy.
Yikes.
29.1% from beyond the arc. Foul shooting, it's better, but not that much better. 282 out of 364. A 68.9% team from the charity stripe. That's not a team, that's not a statistical makeup that enables you to be able to come back from double-digit deficits against NCAA tournament teams on the road in venues like Gamble. But they did it. They did it with the full-court press. It is astounding how good St. John's can be and lock down on defense. Now, the number 2 defense in the country, only Tennessee ranks better. The top 5 in order are Tennessee, St. John's, Houston, Duke, and Kansas are the top 5 per possession teams in the country. Supremely impressive. I wrote about St. John's and Rick Pitino at the Court Report for at the Court Report at CBSSports.com in a Friday column. And we talked about that plenty on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. We didn't get too much into UConn, so I'll veer there real quick. The Huskies have now gone 4-4 in their past 8. Remember, they lost 3 in Maui. Then they ran off a winning streak, and they were 12-3 as of January 7th. But since then, 4-4 with an 8-4 record in the Big East. They've got a game at Creighton on Tuesday. Creighton, oh, by the way, beat Marquette. That game was in Omaha.
Yes.
Creighton is only 1 game behind St. John's. And while I'm acknowledging them, and we're acknowledging them here on the podcast, I don't think people are giving Creighton nearly as much credit and attention and proper framing on what they're doing right now. Creighton can win the Big East. Greg McDermott is doing this with a supremely short bench. What Pitino and McDermott are doing is insane. On the UConn end, you had the return of Liam McNeely, who had a great game, and Hurley even indicated that, like, he wasn't even all the way back, coming back from the high ankle sprain. Whatever, man, he was productive. Solo ball was hot early, but he had 13 points, and they were all in the first half, and then St. John's shut him down. The issue with UConn is that they don't have a healthy point guard. Aiden Mahaney isn't it. He comes off the bench. He's not a point guard. Hassan Diarra is the point guard, but he's dealing with injuries himself and hasn't been able to practice. So him not being fully healthy, in addition to his backup, Ahmad Noel, who's a freshman, also not healthy. UConn's got serious issues, and now it's got to go into Creighton on Tuesday. That's obviously the longest flight they take the entire season in league play after getting beat up by a St. John's team. The Huskies are still safely in the tournament picture, but right now UConn's probably it's probably an 8 seed, a 9 seed at worst. And I think it's going to get in, but it's got at Creighton, at Seton Hall, home to Nova, at St. John's in the next 4. I'd advise going 3-1 to keep your standing pretty good. But yeah, Hurley he wasn't dejected the way I thought he might be. He just kind of in the post-game presser, he kind of said it like it was, and is understanding. Like, I think he's got a real acute awareness of his team's strengths, and when they're really hot, like, they're just about as good as anyone in the country. But man, they've got some real issues right now on the floor in a variety of ways, and he knows that he doesn't have a top 25 team right now.
Yeah, I thought, again, despite, I said it at the jump, but like, despite Auburn losing at home and Florida going in there and putting up 91 points and doing what they did, despite Duke losing at Clemson and Dick Vitale's return to the mic and the folks storming the floor down there, I still think the most impressive thing I saw was St. John's tightening the screws on UConn in that environment, especially considering what UConn did to open the game, which was just bang, bang, bang. And you're like, I mean, this guy's shallow ball's just burying threes again. And Gus Johnson's just, it's Friday night in stores, like, giddy up. And then St. John's is like, nah, son, that's not how we do things here. And that was just, again, man, like, again, the AP poll hasn't come out. The Johnnies were not in the top 10 last week. They absolutely will be on Monday afternoon when the Associated Press rolls out of bed and decides to give us a ranking. Now, I know the AP poll means nothing to guys like you and to Evan Miyakawa, who's going to join us here in the next 5 or 7 minutes, but that's how the general public consumes college basketball. And so, bro, when the Johnnies enter the top 10 this week and you've got them sitting at what, 20-3? Like
21-3, right?
21-3. Okay, great. Like, this is uncharted territory for a lot of people under the age of like 30. Like, they've never seen St. John's this good before.
Not even close.
So that's significant. You mentioned Creighton, by the way. They beat UConn earlier this year at UConn, right?
Yes.
So now UConn has to make the return trip. So maybe we're not done with the UConn slide. Who knows? But fascinating stuff coming out of the Big East. And, again, Norlander, you were there. So I had to text you the Gus Johnson thing because I about near fell out my chair. Dude. Like, I'm downstairs watching this on the couch. And Gus, I mean, he cleans it up. Ha-ha! But come on, dude. Like, there's Big East banners all around. Like, you've got Raft right here.
They honor Ben. Yeah, they honor Ben Gordon. Jim Calhoun was in the house. Emeka Okafor, like a lot, because they retired Ben Gordon's number. It was a celebratory scene in Gamble up to that point, and then it got spoiled the other way around. Where else do you want to go before we welcome in Evan?
Well, I think we got to go to the Big 12. Arizona beat Texas Tech late night in Tucson. The Cats avenged their only Big 12 loss to date. Texas Tech, still a very good team. No shame in losing by 9 at McHale. But we need to keep our eyes on Arizona. It's a shame we only get one Houston-Arizona game this year, at least in the regular season. That's coming up this weekend in Tucson.
Yeah.
Again, man, like the Big 12, like
we only get one Arizona-Kansas game.
What are we doing, guys?
Yeah.
Like, come on. I get it. There's 30 teams in your league. I get it. It's difficult. It's not.
No,
easy.
It shouldn't be. They messed up. I mean, I think they were doing Kelvin Sampson and Bill Self favors by not having Arizona twice. That's my thought on it. But yeah,
okay.
Unfortunate.
Well, I mean, let's go. Your mark. Figure it out, man. I thought Arizona was very impressive. Did I watch that game live? No, I did not. But I did watch it on Sunday morning, and Texas Tech's still really good. Like you didn't get blown out in this game. Like you beat Arizona earlier the year in Lubbock. Like Red Raiders are fine, but I'm starting to look at Arizona a little bit differently. And Caleb Love, like we know what he is. When he's on, he is a problem, and when he's not, he's also a problem because that dude will just keep shooting. he don't care. But I thought Arizona's win over Texas Tech was made my list in terms of like top 5 things from the weekend.
Yeah, Arizona got to as high as 7th in KenPom back in the middle of November, and then it was a 4-5 team, and it dropped to 30th. And now, as we speak here on Monday morning, back in the top 10 at 17-6, 1 loss since December 14th. Quality all-around win for Arizona. I watched that game until I had to drive home in a snowstorm on Saturday night, but made it back okay. No worries whatsoever. But
do you turn the car radio down when you're driving in the snowstorm? Like, do you bring that dad energy where you're like, I need to focus?
I didn't need to. Not to repeat myself too much from Sunday's show. I got caught in a good way behind. I was driving on Interstate 95, the busiest thoroughfare in this great nation.
I've heard of it, Norlander, yes.
A four plow convoy just bulldozing 95. And so I was probably about, maybe 6 or 7 rows behind the cars behind it. So everyone was creeping at about 18, 19 miles an hour, but we were constantly moving because the plows were getting it done. And so I was listening to Arizona, Texas Tech on the broadcast on my phone via YouTube TV and just having a grand old time. Yeah, that's how I got it done.
Kids,
before we bring in Evan, I gotta bring up.
Watch YouTube TV while you're driving. There's
it's more listening.
Shout out to the Varsity Network. You could have listened to that game for free.
I had to get my Sean Farnham fix in. I'm sorry.
Okay, fine.
Kansas State beats Kansas.
Yes, Sunflower State showdown, baby.
Kansas State is the hottest team in college hoops right now. 12-11, have won 5 in a row, including road wins against Iowa State and Arizona State, and now an 81-73 win at home over Kansas. It was definitive. Doug McDaniel had probably his best all-around game, 15 points, 11 assists, 6 boards in a K-State uniform. Coleman Hawkins had himself a nice outing as well, 12 points, 8 assists, 5 blocks, 5 boards. David Gasson had 20 points. That was a team high, and it is just 7 boards. It was great stuff. Kansas has issues. Jayhawks are not one of the 20 best teams in the country at this point. They do get a break here, so to speak. Colorado, Utah, and then BYU are the next, and then Oklahoma State are the next 4. The BYU game is on the road, so we'll see. But at 7-5 in the Big 12, Kansas should be able to correct itself. Before we bring in Evan Miyakawa, I do have to bring this up, though. Kansas State gets this win. It's got some notable names sideline, none bigger than Michael Beasley, who had one of the best freshman seasons in history. And then I've got the update as of Sunday morning via the Mercury, the newspaper out of Manhattan, Kansas. Beasley arrested at airport for marijuana possession. Former Kansas State basketball All-American Michael Beasley was arrested Sunday morning at 5:12 a.m. for possession of marijuana at Manhattan Regional Airport. Beasley, 36, was found with just under 6 grams of marijuana while trying to board a plane, according to Riley County Police Department Director Brian Pete. He was booked and released on $750 bond. Beasley currently listed an address in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It says after the game, Beasley had dinner with K-State coaches and some other former players at Wildcat head coach Jerome Tang's house. It was the first time Beasley was back in Manhattan since 2012. This guy had not been to Manhattan in 13 years. He goes, he sits courtside. Wildcats, EMAW, they dominate, and they pinch this dude for pot at the airport? Are you kidding me? Kansas, can you get with the times? I understand this is a state-by-state situation. This guy's never coming back. What are we doing here?
Okay, so I'm going to take the alternative viewpoint here, which is like, hey, buddy, do you have to bring flour with you on the trip back to Manhattan? It's 2025. Like, you could bring, I don't know, THC lotion. You could bring THC deodorant. You could bring gummies like any normal person who
Can
flies.
You get here? I truly don't know because whatever. I don't do that.
Kansas is
can
not
you
a
get
recreational state.
gummies on? Is that totally different deal?
I've been told that it is a very different deal.
Okay.
Same with the Benjamin Franklin, okay? If you want to bring Penniper Lopez on the plane, people do this all the time. Again, I have been told these things. I'm not Michael Beasley.
I have been told these things, he says.
I'm not addicted to pot to the point where I can't go without it, like, for, 24 hours? Like, come on, Beasley, what you doing, man? Got to be smarter than this. But to your
For
point,
the young ones out there, like
hey.
this kind of thing would happen regularly with actors, musicians in particular, but sports figures. We're talking like 1970s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. These were major headlines. Like these were scandals. And now it's like, what are we doing here? But it's Kansas. They had to do what they had to do.
If you're Michael Beasley, you're breaking the law. Okay, that's what you're doing. Like, come
breaking
on,
the law, breaking the law.
Just take it easy, all right?
Never getting this guy back to the octagon of doom.
You're probably right. He's like, why would I bother? Like, you guys won't even let me throw down. But again, man, like, just be smarter or fly private. I thought Beasley did pretty well for himself in the NBA, but apparently, he's flying Southwest. Who knows? Let's hit pause on that. Let's bring in Evan Miyakawa. He will join the show coming up next. Evan, good morning.
Hey guys, how's it going?
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Early, 7:30 West Coast.
I'm doing a podcast tomorrow with DeCourcy, and it's going to be at 5:50 local, so this is nothing.
Well, first of all, that's incredible timing because we had DeCourcy on.
I know. We had this planned. Like I was going to do it last week, and then I was sick last week, so it got postponed to this week. And then when he was on your show, I thought that was pretty funny.
Hey,
what's the podcast with DeCourcy?
He does a weekly segment with Jim Coyle out of Bloomington. Mm-hmm. He has a Indiana-centric radio show, and I've been on his show before, and then he reached out to me about talking about my new resume quality metric, and then he was like, actually, you should just come on the one with DeCourcy since he does bracketology. So,
gotcha. Okay. Dig it. We're going to get into the resume quality stuff here.
Great.
Okay. Evan listens to the show. He knows the deal, Hartzell. You ready to roll?
He does. All right, let's fire this up. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. As promised, Evan Miyakawa kind enough to join the show. Evan, you listened to the show. You've commented about our program. You're a really smart college basketball guy, so I apologize for some of the takes that you hear, mainly from me, not so much from Norlander. But thank you for hopping on with us. I want to start with this. Number 1 and number 2 teams in the AP poll, not necessarily in your poll, went down over the weekend. How much does that shake up what you're doing on your website? Because I find evanmia.com awesome because it is, and we can get into this, it looks different than most college basketball numbers sites. There's emojis, like it's very easy to navigate. Like I think it's great. But how much did the results? Norlander's laughing, but it's a real thing, man. You want
I like the emojis. I'm not laughing at you. I agree. The emojis are a great touch. I told Evan this.
The damn thing. Okay, so Evan, Auburn and Duke both lose. How much did that shake up what you had at the top of your rankings?
Not much. I mean, I think it was more of a result for Auburn because they were supposed to win that game by about 10 points or so, and instead they get rocked. So I do think that moves them down a peg a little bit, but I still have them third. Duke and Auburn, along with Houston, are still comfortably a tier above everyone else in the country. For Duke, hardly at all. I mean, I think one of the main things you'll find with a site like mine is that I do not overreact to things. Statistical models, rather, don't overreact to things in the same way that humans do. And so we knew Duke was going to take a loss at some point. It was pretty impressive that they were winless this far into ACC play. So the fact that they took one at Clemson, who's one of the, 2 or 3 other best teams in the ACC in a relatively down year, I don't think that's super surprising. And it was really close in the end, too. It wasn't like they got whooped or anything. So hardly at all. I still have Duke number 1, Houston number 2, Auburn 3, and then there's a pretty sizable gap, and then you got the rest of the teams at the top there.
So we got a month left, give or take, in college basketball's regular season. Who's a team that your data, your site likes more than the general public, and maybe who's a team that you think might be undervalued based on your numbers and your metrics?
Yeah, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I've got 2 that are both inside my top 10, Kansas at 9 and Gonzaga at 10. And for both those teams, I'll specifically highlight Kansas. Really, most of the season where my models have had Kansas has been against the public narrative. This was flipped initially in the preseason. Kansas was the number 1 team. I think I had them 7th or 8th in the preseason, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that my models were not as high on their transfer portal class and the pieces that they were bringing in as people consider them in the preseason. I think they were considered at minimal a top 5 incoming transfer class. I had them barely inside the top 20. And now you look at where they're at this season, and those transfers largely have been not delivering in the way that they expected. So that's kind of panned out. But now I think it's kind of course corrected where I'm higher on Kansas than most Kansas fans are and a lot of the other public, just because people aren't used to seeing them not at this elite level that they normally are at. But based on the roster strength they have, based on Bill Self as a coach and the way that my models evaluate that and all those things, I still think Kansas is a top 10 team. I still think they're good enough to make an Elite Eight. And so now I kind of feel like I'm probably one of the highest teams on Kansas. And to be honest, I think if Kansas were to go and win 2 or 3 big games in a row, all of a sudden people would be back on Kansas just because they believe in Bill Self. They believe in what this program can do. So I'm calling it ahead of time. If they turn a corner, I don't think it's going to be that surprising.
Okay, we'll see on that. And they've been up and down, but you yes, as Evan just mentioned, he's got Kansas 10, Gonzaga 9 in his top 10 teams. If you go to evanmiya.com, that's EVANMIYA.com. I highly recommend it. I check it practically daily. Want to do a little bit of a reset though for folks checking in that might not be all that familiar or are curious, because if you go right now and you look at it, the things that pop up on the primary screen are top 10 teams and top 10 players. Now, if you go to top 10 players right now, this is the top 10 in order. Janai Broome, Cooper Flagg. Number 3 is Zakai Ziegler at Tennessee. 4 is Braden Smith at Purdue. 5 is JoJo Tugler at Houston. 6 is Dylan Cardwell at Auburn. 7 is Hunter Dickinson at Kansas. 8 is Cam Jones at Marquette. 9 is Braden Huff at Gonzaga. Yes, he's 9. And then UCLA's Eric Daly is 10th of your top 10 players. Explain to people, because if someone that loves college basketball but hadn't seen your site went and looked at this, they'd be like, don't know what this is. You will never convince me Eric Daly is one of the 10 best players in college basketball. Explain why they are ranked the way they are ranked and how your system goes about ranking players overall. Is it value? Is it production? Is it predictive? How do you bring it all together?
Yeah, great question. So the metric that you're referring to, Bayesian performance rating, is kind of my overall metric I use to basically quantify how much value a player is bringing to their team when they're on the court. That looks at your individual statistical efficiency and production, so scoring, rebounding, assists, all that stuff. But it also looks at when you're on the court, how are you impacting your team's performance? Because at the end of the day, as a coach, you're trying to put in players who are going to get you to win that game and to score more points than your opponent. So whether that guy's scoring 30 points per game or 5, if he's having a big impact on the court, that's important. And so my system really does measure a lot more of that kind of thing than you'll usually see. And so, yeah, typically when you look at the top 10, 6 or 7 of those names will be pretty typical, All-American caliber names that people are talking about, especially in terms of offensive production. You mentioned a lot of those names: Broome, Flagg, Braden Smith, Hunter Dickinson, Cam Jones, but then you have guys like Joseph Tugler. Tugler, I think, still has the highest or second highest defensive rating in the country. And part of that's because, yes, his individual defensive numbers are good. But when you look at Houston, who's the best defensive team in the country, he has been their best defensive player, both in terms of his individual stats, but also in terms of how well Houston is playing when he's on the court. And it adjusts on a per possession level for every player that he's playing against and how good they are. And so it gives credit to players who, if the coach is always putting you in to guard the other team's star player, you get more credit for that defensively than if you're guarding the team's bench unit, for example. So you'll have guys like Tugler and Cardwell in there. Again, this is per possession, so this is not necessarily saying on the basis of overall their season total stats how good they are. This is predicting going forward how valuable they are going to be on a per possession basis. And those guys, Tugler and Cardwell for Houston and Auburn in particular, have been really, really big kind of glue pieces for those teams to excel in the way that they have to allow their other star players to play well. And when you look at the advanced metrics, both in terms of their individual efficiency and in terms of how well the team is performing when they're on the court, they're making a huge difference.
If you go to Evan's site and then you click specifically on the left column, there's a lot of things there: home player ratings, team resumes, all this kind of stuff. But if you hit team ratings, what Hartzell was referring to previously, some of these teams have little emojis next to it, and you can hover over and you can see why they have what they have. For example, as we speak this morning, Auburn is 3rd in Evan's rankings, and there's a little downward emoji, downward chart, and it says this team has played worse in recent games than earlier this season. This is good little bits of context that we love KenPom, we love Torvik, but Evan's got a nice little flair to his site that is user friendly. You want to really peek under the hood and really get a good look at it, but he's bringing a lot of very interesting and intriguing things to the college basketball analytical space. I did a piece 2.5 weeks ago that was basically, I'd been wanting to write it for a couple of weeks, and then one reason or another, I delayed it a little bit. But I wrote about how this year the freshman class in college basketball is statistically setting up to be one of the better ones and stronger ones in recent memory over the past decade. And then purely coincidentally, you also had been working on something like this, and you subsequently posted something on your site as well. Bring folks in and add the context to it. We know that Cooper Flagg is good, and we've seen a guy here, a guy there. The Rutgers guys, Rutgers is terrible, but they've got 2 draft picks. But outside of like awesome freshmen that are going to be top 10 NBA picks, why is this freshman class potentially one of the 2, 3, or 4 best we've seen, Evan, in 20 to 25 years?
Yeah, when we talk about the freshman class being impactful, I think what we're really referring to is when you're watching your average game on television, a top 25 matchup, you see freshmen being a major factor in how these teams are performing and how they're going to do in March. And so when you use that player metric we talked about earlier, Bayesian performance rating, which I think is probably one of the most accurate ways of just measuring, hey, just on an overall impact level, how good are these freshmen doing? And you look at top 200 players in the sport at my website over the this goes back to 2011. There are more freshmen inside the top 20 nationally than we've seen since I think the 2016-17 season. So it's been almost a decade. So not just the star freshmen who are going to be top 5 or top 10 picks, but even freshmen who may not necessarily have, a bright NBA future, but are really having an impact in their first year in college. And that's still in a year where we have 5th-year seniors playing. So it's more challenging than it has been in some of those previous years. There are more freshmen kind of in the top 200, 250 players in the sport than we've seen in a really long time. The data backs that up. And I think that just kind of comes across the screen anecdotally when we're watching, Thomas Sorber at Georgetown or Derek Queen at Maryland. These guys are having an impact. And this just was not the case certainly last year and hasn't been this way for a while.
Evan, I wanted to ask you about an article that you had on your blog. I am a subscriber, and I thought it was interesting because we're coming up on, it's February. People are going to start talking about the bracket and resumes and the whole shebang. Bubble teams, right? Norlander loves a good bubble team. You want to abolish the quadrant system, Evan. Explain why.
Well, the quadrant system, I don't think in itself is used poorly by the committee. Based on my conversations with people involved there, they're obviously very nuanced about the way that they look at resumes and they look at all the different metrics that we have, and they do a good job there. But the way that the quadrant system is used kind of in public conversation, if you just take it at face value, it's very I think it's so popular because it tells a clear message. It tells you, how did you do against the best teams on your schedule? And then basically, did you drop any losses that you shouldn't have? That's really the message that it's getting across there. And so for that reason, I think it's become popular, especially in sort of media circles. But the quadrant system, the way it's set up, is pretty crude in the sense that there's specific cutoffs where if you're a top 75 team instead of 76, that means you're quad 1 instead of quad 2 based on where the venue is and all that stuff. And there's just a lot of stuff missed. It's kind of in these strict cutoffs. And so I basically am sort of recommending going towards metrics that have more of a fluid scale that really capture more of the nuance of what's going on there. And so one of the best ways to do this is using wins above bubble. It's something that has been added to the team sheet recently. Bart Torvik obviously has popularized it. I created a similar one to that ilk that's measuring something fairly related called resume quality. And it's basically looking at, based on how hard your schedule would be for a team that would just make the tournament, how many more wins do you have than expected? But the thing that's really unique about this is it separates that into win quality and loss quality. So for every single game that you win or you lose, you can actually see the specific value that game has based on how difficult that matchup would be, based on your opponent, based on the venue for a team that would just make the tournament. And so you can actually look at a team's resume and say, not just, oh, this team is ranked 6th in resume quality, but Purdue, for example, right now is 3rd in win quality and 13th in loss quality. So that means that their wins are top 5 in the country, but they've dropped a few more, questionable games or just a volume of games than another team ranked similarly. And I think it gives a lot more context to what a team has done just based on wins and losses. And, obviously I think is a more scientific approach to measuring how good a team's resume is based on, okay, regardless of whether you play in the SEC or the WCC, how have you done against your schedule? How difficult would this be for another team to do who's a tournament caliber team or right along that line? And so I do think it brings a lot of value there, and would be an improvement over something like the quadrant system in that regard.
What do you make
Okay,
of that,
I want to jump in
Norlander?
here real quick.
You good with that? You want to abolish the quadrants too?
Me?
Yes.
I would. I don't have a huge issue with it. My co-host GP loves quadrants.
Loves a good quadrant.
It's an easy way to bucket, but it's not a gradient system, and it's not the worst thing in the world. There are better ways. And fortunately, if anyone listening is really just starting to come around and get dialed in on college hoops, just know that last summer there were updates to the NCAA team sheets, and now they have essentially almost all the data they could possibly ask for. And talking to a few committee members, it does feel like, although there are 5 new committee members on the board this year, they have a general understanding, but we've got wins above bubble and Torvik that are new to it. Strength of record is become more emphasized, and it's key to know, and I'm going to get to, I got a follow-up question for Evan here, but one key thing to remember is that Ken Pomeroy, Bart Torvik, the folks that are, on the team sheets, maybe Evan Me is going to get there one day, who knows, but they don't believe that the committee, and I agree with this, the committee should not be deciding how to select teams based on what they are in predictive metrics. It should be about what you've done against your schedule. Now, the discussion gets nuanced therein when you've got, in particular, mid-major teams that aren't afforded that. But the good news is that wins above bubble will allow you to overcome those scheduling hurdles. And I'll be interested to see this season and beyond how that works. Like, just for an example, UC San Diego beat UC Irvine over the weekend on the road. Those teams wound up splitting. We'll see what happens in the league tournament, whether or not UC San Diego is even in the field. But right now, UC San Diego is a top 50 team in KenPom, and it actually is the highest rated mid-major team from a traditional one-bid league. The only other quote-unquote mid-major teams or in mid-major leagues aren't really mid-majors. It's like VCU and Memphis, and that might be it right now. For a team like that, I'll be interested to see how they're handled. Hartzell, you got me way off track here. Following up with Evan, with the whole resume metric. If you go to a site, you go to the left column, you see team resumes with the paperclip icon. You want to click on that. Right now, the greatest discrepancy in the top 20 is Marquette. Win quality rank is 9. Loss quality rank is 26. So I'm looking at this right now, and I don't think there's a team right now in the top 20 that has a wider gap between win quality and loss quality than the Golden Eagles, who are slumping just a little bit here. But bigger pick question for you is, why did you put all the time and effort and investment into doing this kind of thing? Is it because you believe that the committee has, been a bit static in how it's been doing it? You just wanted to add another thing to the general conversation and increase the chances that we can be that much better, hopefully. By we, I mean, obviously the committee, when it comes to selecting teams. I just wanted to know your motivations behind it, because, more data is a good thing. And I think this is adding to the conversation that needs to, in a very productive way, Evan. And that is to say, how we are evaluating teams against the schedule that was afforded to them in context is very key. And obviously that has missed in years past, not every single time, but more times than not over the past 10, 15, and particularly 20 years ago. This kind of data and this kind of framing just wasn't available.
I think with the addition of wins above bubble to what the selection committee is directly looking at means that there is an opening for stuff like this to become more valuable and important in the process of selecting teams and just in the general conversation. Honestly, I think a lot of the motivation for me in creating something like this went last year when Indiana State, resume-wise, was a good enough team to make the tournament as an at-large, and yet a lot of people just kind of figured they may not make this tournament if they don't win their conference tourney, just because the way things are often done, they're not going to make it. And I just don't think that's fair. And I think a lot of, too, what you're seeing in scheduling in terms of, high major teams wanting to avoid teams like an Indiana State or like a Drake or a Bradley, or a team who's going to be a top 100 team, not in one of these power conferences. And oftentimes the committee is just going to dock you for losing that game potentially. An approach like this says, hey, that game is more difficult based on the team you're playing. So if you win that game, you're going to get more credit than if you beat, East West University from, Ohio, so I think we just need more measures like this where it protects against some of the bias that can be there, and also some of the scheduling practices that are put into place because of fears of of playing teams that are not regarded as the strongest teams in the country or from high major conferences, but still actually have a good chance of beating you even at home. And so, yeah, I think the Big West is a great example of this, where I think largely speaking, people have a little bit of an aversion to giving credit to a team who has not very many losses in their loss column, but hasn't really beat anyone of note. The reality is that, especially when you're playing in a conference like the Big West, for example, where 7 or 8 of the teams are inside the top 200, it is not a cakewalk to win all of those games. And so you should get more credit for winning those games than if you're, a SEC school beating on sub 300 teams in the non-conference. Those games are not the same. And so, for UC Irvine, I have ranked 42nd in resume ranking right now, and UC San Diego, as you mentioned, on my site, is barely outside the top 50. Just based on the merit of those teams each having 4 losses and some of the teams that they've beaten, some of the harder teams that they've lost to, just on the accumulation of their season, I think they're more deserving to be in than people are regarding them. Again, like you mentioned, this is all the way on the side of just based on wins and losses. It has no predictive element whatsoever. If you want to swing all the way to the other side and say, how good do I think these teams are? Look at the team ratings page on my website. That's all just predictive. It's as predictive as possible. So I'm really kind of using both of these on either end of the spectrum to kind of tell the full picture of how good have you been this season and how good do I think you're going to be going forward.
So to your point, Evan, and I apologize, like I am the layperson here. I'm the one asking the dumb questions. But to your point, you've got Gonzaga on your team resumes at 46. You've got them just out of the field, and you've got them in the top 10 in terms of your team ranking. So that kind of explains, sort of, that's one team obviously, but you look at North Carolina, you've got them 50 just out of the field as far as the NCAA tournament goes. So I know you update this stuff daily, which I appreciate. A lot of these other guys, these so-called bracketologists, they just go dark for like 3-4 days at a time, Evan. So I appreciate that you're on top of that, especially this time of the year. So thank you.
Well, it's not my opinion. It's just a computer model, so I think it's a little bit easier than what
automated. Hartzell.
Yeah.
Well,
gosh.
I'm just saying, anyway.
On that note, right now, teams just in the field in resume quality. Let's repeat this for the audience. This is not a predictive model. This is what these teams have done against their schedule versus what they would have with expected bubble wins and against the other teams balanced for the field. Just in the field right now, UConn, Nebraska, UC Irvine, shouts to the Eaters, Georgia, San Diego State, which took a loss at Colorado State over the weekend. I thought that was a significant Mountain West result. George Mason just in the field. Now, I haven't, listen, we're 4 weeks more in the regular season, then we got league tournament. I haven't dug in on GMU just yet. That is surprising to me, and that is a good sign for the A-10 because you got to have VCU way above this. Where's VCU right now? Where's your VCU? Oh, there they are. Just out of the field. Mason is just in, VCU just out. Now, the difference between these two is tight. But the A-10 is just trying, hopefully, maybe to be a 2-bid league. So that's definitely very, very intriguing. Okay, last thing for me, and then if Hartzell's got anything, something, then we'll cut you loose, Evan. Your site's got all sorts of tons of great stuff. You can do 2-man, 3-man, 4-man lineup rotations. I highlighted some of this stuff at cbssports.com earlier this season. Your site is invaluable when it comes to, at the end of the season, portal rankings and all this stuff, both players and classes. So this is a big, broad question, but I want you to do the sell here because you've got, for all the great stuff that comes from Ken Palm, and Torvik's got a ton of stuff that I love digging around in. I'd say your site has more toys on it, so to speak, than any for the college hoops data junkies out there. Highlight 1 or 2, 3 things that either have been mainstays from the start or you implemented them in the past, 2, 3, 4 months, but stuff that people might have fun with or should know about that they can see when they go to evanmia.com.
So the big thing new for this season, which was my big off-season project last year, was I have player projections, which basically looks at all of the ways that a player would normally statistically contribute: 3-point shooting, 2-point shooting, rebounds, assists, all that good stuff. What it does is it looks at your game-by-game history over the course of your career, and based on who you've played and how you've performed in those games, it predicts how good you're going to be in those categories going forward, and then it converts that into a letter grade and a percentile grade against Division I. And so when you pull up a player like a Cooper Flagg, for example, it'll tell you that it'll give you all of his overall grades. He's an A+ in scoring. He's a B in rebounding, B+ in playmaking. And that's not just based on what he's done this season. It's based on predicting what he's going to do going forward based on all the information that we have about him. And it'll predict specifically those values. And there's some different graphical ways that you can view that. But then build on top of that, I also have a lineup efficiency predictor now, where based on any lineup that you have of guys who have played together or who haven't played together, if you're looking in the portal, based on how well that lineup has played, if it's played at all, but also the individual quality of those players, if you're mixing and matching players from different teams, it'll predict how good that lineup is going to be based compared to Division I, and it'll tell you all the strengths and weaknesses of that lineup: shooting, rebounding, turnovers, assists, all that stuff. And so it's been really valuable already this season to better quantify what players are doing, but I think it's going to even reach more value during the offseason as teams are looking to retool through the portal and through high school ranks, where it's going to be a much more objective way of saying, hey, this guy shot 40% on 5 attempts at Morehead State. Is that good? And it's actually going to be able to say, like, this is where this guy stacks up in terms of predicted 3-point percentage going forward. And so as teams are looking in the portal, they can say, hey, we want a guy who's 90th percentile or better in projected shooting next year. We're going to target those guys exclusively. And as you're building a lineup, you can also look and see, like, hey, here would be the strengths and weaknesses of our starting lineup if we're bringing these 3 guys back and we get this transfer from Clemson and this transfer from a Mountain West school. I think all these tools are going to continue to be more valuable, and I'm really excited to see that playing out. A lot of coaches are already chomping at the bit, are ready to be using this as the portal cycle gets going.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. My last question for me, Evan, who hit you up more about your site, like and the metrics? Is it bettors or is it coaching staffs, or is it an equal balance of both?
That's a good question. I do have a lot of sports bettors who use my site, but a lot of them really know what they're doing, and so they know how to figure out how to use it. It's part of their regular utility. They're not banging on my door for questions, which I appreciate. But the coaches are the ones who actually need to be educated on this stuff more somewhat. And so they'll see stuff and they'll be like, hey, this is awesome, but I don't really understand it. Can you explain it to me? I love having conversations like that and breaking down things really to any level, because whether you're really into the numbers or not at all, you can still see the utility of a lot of the stuff that I do. And so I love being able to explain it really in whatever way is helpful to people.
You still fill out a bracket though, right? Like when it's tournament time, you still fill it out with like pen and paper.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just the only way to do it.
Just making sure you're human. That's all. Evan Miyakawa, kind enough to join us at Evan Miya on Twitter, and the website is evanmiya.com. Evan, thank you, man. Good to see you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Steven. Hope you can recover from all that buffalo chicken dip from last night.
We haven't talked about that. There's several pounds of it.
I know what he's talking about
in my system. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
There you go. Very good stuff. Yeah, we haven't talked about that. Norlander, I don't know how much spinach artichoke dip you consumed yesterday, but
0. It wound up being 0.
Dude, that's impressive. I don't know how you watch a game and not just devour.
Well, we had some other stuff. We don't need to get too heavy into the details
food.
there. By the way, Evan Miya, moving on up in this world, because his data is referenced more frequently now. You see it like sometimes media will present it as context for asking a coach a question. Sometimes coaches specifically will reference this because he's got stuff that'll say, okay, this 2-man combo or this 3-man combo is the best for this given team. Sometimes it's the best in the context of a conference or nationally. And so coaching staffs pay attention to that, as they should, and they're implementing it. So it's interesting to see how the data is informing some of the decision making once the data has enough data to support what Evan's putting out there. And then you even get more and more references on TV for Evan. So he does a really good job. He's a very high rising figure, not just in the data community, but in college basketball. I spotlighted him and his site last year in the court report for CBSSports.com, and it was a joy to do so. And happy to have him back on. And yeah, man, appreciate him listening as well. He's dialed all the way in out there on the West Coast. We got about 13 minutes, and then I got a hard out because I got an HQ hit. We don't really have to get to anything else from the weekend, I don't think. I know we didn't touch on a ton. If you want more, listen to Sunday Eye on College Basketball Pod. We got into a lot of that. I will say Mississippi State winning at Georgia felt like a significant result for Mississippi State to go in and get that win. They've had a really tough schedule. They're coming off of the toughest 3.5-4 week schedule, I think, of any SEC team to this point. And so I thought it was a close shave win. They got the win, and then elsewhere in the SEC, Bama held off Arkansas. Hogs aren't dead. That would have been a potentially a season-altering win in that if Arkansas had been able to beat Alabama on Saturday, would have been in the tournament picture right here today on Monday and really had some momentum. And now, as it stands, they got to continue to try and get back off the mat. We'll see if Calipari's team can do that moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, Monday night, I'll let you set up Tuesday, Wednesday real quick. Monday is relatively slow, but there are 2 games worth watching. UNC is at Clemson, 7 Eastern on ESPN. UNC barely beat Pitt, and I mean barely beat Pitt on Saturday. Not an enjoyable watch. I was watching it at HQ's headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, but UNC gets the win and therefore avoids being entirely out of the tournament picture. If it wins at Clemson on Monday, then we can reassess.
It's not happening.
You don't think Clemson – so it's going to be big problems in Little John for UNC. That's what you're saying.
I don't think UNC is going to the tournament, man. I don't see it.
They got to win this game if they want to go to the tournament. I'll tell you that much.
And maybe, beat Duke at the end of the year. Like, North Carolina's not tournament good, man. They're not. I get that they've got the jerseys and they've got the, like – they've got the brand. They got the brand. That's it.
Got the brand.
RJ Davis should
Clemson,
not have come
don't
back
put a
to school
letdown
for
here.
this.
Yeah, if Clemson want to have its eyes on a 5-6 seed, don't lose at home to UNC. Then Baylor is at Houston. It could get ugly. Baylor just suffered a season-ending injury to one of its key bigs, Josh Ojewuna. He's done for the year. That makes him even smaller all around. Like, they're going to have to go with a 4-guard attack. I just talked to Scott Drew like 4 days ago, and he was giddy because they had just had, I think he told me they had their first practice since the season started where everyone was playing in it, participating. The first one. We're in the middle of February, and now they're not going to have it again because he's out for the year. Baylor's 15-8. They've been up and down. That's a road test against Houston. We'll see if they can keep it close. So that's all you need to know on Monday. What's on tap for Tuesday, Hartzell?
A lot. Tuesday is very crowded. It's loaded. I think Auburn at Vanderbilt should have your attention. Vanderbilt has been slaying giants at Memorial Gym, and Auburn comes to town, and let's see what Auburn's about. Everybody thinks they're the best team in the country. Everybody thinks they're the best roster in the country. All right, man, do it at Vanderbilt. Like, I'm not saying Vanderbilt's Final Four good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that, I mean, they have beaten a lot of very good teams in their building. Now Auburn comes to town. So let's see what that's about. That's on SEC Network, by the way. That's
a Vandy game. What do you want?
You're going to have to look for that one. Tennessee, Kentucky gets the main screen. That's obviously a significant matchup.
Ooh, that's tasty.
That is tasty. Kentucky needs to start winning some of these games. Florida at Mississippi State. Like, I mean, again, we've been saying this for weeks, but like these SEC midweek slates, these SEC Saturday slates are just, it's just banger after banger after banger. Mississippi State that's a tough place to play. Florida's got to go on the road again and play a top 25 team. Purdue at Michigan. Yes, please. Like, Michigan, nice win at Assembly Hall.
That's just a great win. I mean, a great game.
Yeah.
It's a Peacock game, by the way.
Dude, Peacock's got a busy Tuesday night. You've got UCLA at Illinois, also on Peacock.
They got Purdue, Michigan, and UCLA, Illinois both on Peacock.
And don't sleep on DePaul Marquette. Okay, also on Peacock.
Here's the problem
night for Peacock. Busy night.
Purdue, Michigan is a 7 Eastern tip. UCLA, Illinois is 8 Eastern. I can't go 2 at the same time.
That's correct.
This is bad programming.
Listen. This is the future, Matt. Like,
no, can I quad box on the cock?
So, God, Peacock needs a solution to this, just like we have with YouTube TV, where you can go side by side.
You can't have 2 games of this magnitude overlapping.
Here we are.
That's Purdue at Michigan, UCLA, Illinois. Those are 2 of the 3 best games of the night. Tennessee, Kentucky's also in there. You also got Bama, Texas. That's a 9 Eastern ESPN. Arizona at Kansas State.
Shout out to
on the
streamers.
plus.
Shout out to the streamers. That's on ESPN Plus. That's right next to some. That's going to be wedged in between a Sun Belt and a MAC game on ESPN Plus Tuesday night. UConn Creighton 9 o'clock on CBS Sports. That one's buried on CBS Sports Network. Good luck.
It's not buried. It's highlighted. What are you talking about?
Okay,
UConn Creighton 9 Eastern CBS Sports Network. Big time game.
That's a massive game. So Tuesday night is chock full, man. It's loaded. Mondays have become kind of sleepy in the college basketball world. Wednesday, St. John's, Villanova. That's, by the way, 6 o'clock Eastern start.
I love it.
Not 6:30.
I even
6
love the
o'clock.
6. Give me the 6. Yeah, I love it.
Now, I mean, that game's at Villanova. Downtown Philly could still be smoldering. I'm not sure.
Do we know when the parade is?
Don't know.
I feel like parade's going to be Thursday.
Oklahoma, Missouri at 9. Missouri lost. This did not make the weekend recap. Missouri lost at the buzzer to Texas A&M. And
Near buzzer, yeah.
There was 1 second left. Okay, fine.
It's not the buzzer. I don't know what you want from me.
Fine. Wade Taylor, the fourth, hit a 3 in the final second. Watch out for Cash Bar Buzz. Well, I'm just saying. Like, there's a lot going on in the SEC. Watch out for Cash Bar Buzz. Okay.
Cash Bar Buzz is a great name.
Just
we can keep that going on the show. Cash Bar Buzz
out for
is
Cash
elite.
Bar Buzz and the three-piece.
That's elite gloss right there. A&M is a 2 seed right now, folks. Just go ahead, take a look at that. Actually, let me see real quick. EvanMiyakawa.com. Resume quality. Texas A&M resume rank 8 equates to a 2 seed. Here we go.
And
fourth best win quality in the sport right now, A&M. Good stuff for them.
If you're looking for a sleeper in Nashville, too, like I'm just saying, I don't know if you're going to be in Nashville, but I will. And A&M has made that tournament game like 3 of the last 4 years, the championship game on Sunday. So, all right, there is your look ahead. Let's quickly talk some tunes on the way out the door. Your thoughts on the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl halftime performance, Matt, were?
Pretty good. Not all-time great. I thought from a production standpoint, some of the choreography was amazing. I thought the lighting was a little bit tough, though. And I actually thought the sound mixing wasn't great either. So from a production standpoint, I thought it was missing a beat here or there. Performance-wise, pretty good. I mean, he brought out SZA, and you had a cameo from Serena Williams.
Yes, you did.
Which was awesome. And even my wife was like, wait, is that Serena? I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Serena. And indeed it was. And that was pretty tremendous. He didn't go across the board with all of his most well-known hits. Obviously played the one everyone was waiting on. And the execution of that was pretty good overall. I left satisfied by it, but I was maybe a tick below what I thought it would be overall. What about you?
I thought it was okay. I thought it was fine. Kendrick Lamar it's not like listening to like Future or Lil Wayne with your buddies, okay? Like you've got to like really lock in lyrically as to what's going on with Kendrick Lamar, okay? And so to your point on the sound mixing, I caught that too. I thought that was on my end, frankly, because I've got just noise and there's kids asking questions. Although, dude, my house was like people packed it up in the second quarter. It was 34-0. Not in the second quarter, but
24. But yeah, who's counting?
In the third quarter, it got to be 34-0. My point is, like, I was alone by the time that Kendrick Lamar performance ended, because people were just packing it in. I will say this: got a lot of texts. The white community was offended. They were confused. They didn't understand what was happening. Not all of them, but a lot of people.
I'm in the white community. I wasn't offended. I wasn't confused.
You're pretty plugged in musically as to like who Kendrick Lamar is and what he's doing. There's a lot of folks out there that have no clue, and that went completely over their heads. I'm sure the FCC received some calls.
Well, whatever. He's a really strong performer. He's actually, there have been plenty of instances where his actual performance and how he delivers some of these songs, he's done way more intense stuff than this, but I thought it was pretty good. Before we get out of here, Rolling Stone has ranked every single halftime Super Bowl show ever. I'm not going to give you the full list. Go ahead and Google that and check it out. They put Kendrick at 13th all time, which did surprise me because I thought he was going to crack the top 10. I've got the top 10 for you in order. Here we go. Lady Gaga 2017 is 10. I remember that. Pretty solid. Madonna in 2012 being 9. Gotta be honest, I don't remember this halftime show. I think LMFAO was involved in there.
No.
Rihanna at 8 just 2 years ago is lower than I expected. I thought she killed it, but I have not looked at this list. I'm reading it in real time. I don't know what's the order here. 7 is Springsteen and the E Street Band in 2009 with the famous crotch shot into the camera. It was a pretty awesome performance. That's definitely top 10. 6, Shakira, Jennifer Lopez in 2020. I thought they did pretty well. 6 seems a little bit high in retrospect, but I'd be willing to go back and look and see. 5, Aerosmith, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Nelly, and Mary J. Blige in 2001. I'll take their word for it. I don't know about that. 4, Dre, Snoop, Eminem, Kendrick, Mary J. Blige, and 50 Cent 3 years ago at the LA Super Bowl. That was an incredible halftime show. I can believe you on face value. That was top 5. That was big time. Beyonce 2013 was 3. I can't believe it's been 12 years since Beyonce performed at a Super Bowl halftime show. Has it really been 12 years already? Really? That's 3. 2 is U2 in 2002. That was after 9/11, a very big time performance, probably in the top 5. And then, of course, number 1, Prince, In the Rain, Chicago Bears versus the Indianapolis Colts, 2007, down there in Miami. That is the number 1. That is right.
What is the worst?
And there's your top 10. I think Kendrick is top 10. I would bump out Madonna, and I would bump out. I mean, was Aerosmith, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Nelly? I mean, maybe it was an incredible collaboration. That's top 5. Come on, Rolling Stone.
Norlander, what's the worst, according to Rolling Stone? What is the worst Super Bowl halftime?
I'm going to scroll back up.
It's probably Maroon 5 in Atlanta.
No, that was
shame.
Black Eyed Peas 2011 is the worst. And then the second worst is everything that happened from 1967 to 1989 when they did not have halftime performers.
Okay, very good. So there you go. Congratulations to the Eagles and their fans. They are absolute psychopaths. But this is what happens when you draft an SEC All-Star team. Like, this is what happens. You win a Lombardi trophy. So shout out to Philadelphia and their fans. You have absolutely earned this one. And just chill with the takes today. Like, log off, please. Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to be just fine, okay? They are fine. It's okay that you lost. It's not the end of the world. Doesn't mean the dynasty is over forever. You just lost to a better team. It's okay. Like, just log off with this stuff, man. All these people, they feel like they have to have the takes, Norlander. It's okay to not have an opinion on everything all the time, all right? And by the way, before your HQ hit, make sure you button down the collars there, man.
All right, let's go.
You got to button those things down. All right, thanks to Evan Mia for joining us. For Norlander, I'm Hartzell. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday. So long. You look a lot better, buddy. There you go. Well done.